Well, this week's Barron's cover story looks at how Boeing can bounce back. Barron senior writer and industrial specialist Al Heavy Machinery Root joins the roundtable. Al, tell me three things Boeing should do right now to breathe life into its shares.
Thank you for that title, Jack. Three things. Number one, I think that Boeing should design a brand new plane, slightly larger than the 737 MAX, to address some key product concerns, help it stop market share loss against its European rival Airbus, and also energize the engineering workforce. Number two, I actually think that they should sell stock. I think that the pandemic has blown a big hole in its balance sheet, partly through no fault of its own. I think actually selling equity would be well received by investors, because a little bit better balance sheet could bring investors back to the company that might have worried about the balance sheet. And number three, I'd like to see them spend more money on R&D. R&D spending has come down through the pandemic. I think it's the wrong time to do that. I think they need to be bolder and think big.
You told me that Boeing could learn a thing or two from General Electric about turnarounds. What do you mean by that?
Well, both are great American companies, hit some hard times. Both have new CEOs that were on the board. Larry Culp, I think the hallmark of Larry Culp's turnaround is how fast he acted at General Electric. He dramatically reduced debt, sold assets, restructured, brought in new management at a pace that was almost dizzying. Now, Dave Calhoun, by contrast, hasn't gone as fast. He's been dealing with pandemic. However, I think that he could take a lesson from Larry, speed up the pace of change, and it would end up helping Boeing in the long run.
If Boeing gets it right, what do you think the upside for the stock looks like?
Well, I said 325, up about 35%. And listen, there's a number of ways to get there, but basically Airbus, its European rival, is off about 15% from its all-time high. Boeing, very roughly, down 50% from its all-time high. Better execution, more confidence from investors, and you close that gap.
Lauren, jump in here.
I have a question for you, Al, about Dave Calhoun, that's Boeing's CEO. He actually came out of GE, spent many years there before going to Nielsen. He has been on the board of Boeing since 2009. He's been CEO since January 2020. Tell me a bit about his management style.
I think he's thought of as a straight shooter, maybe a little gruff, maybe even too much of a straight shooter, depending on your opinion and who you talk to. You know, he rebuffed ideas about rebranding the MAX as silly. You know, some people took exception to that. So it's been, you know, a bit of a rocky start, I would say. You know, I think he's done a good job. I think he gets good marks for managing through an incredible crisis, which is COVID. You know, he managed GE aircraft engines, the GE aerospace franchise, through 9/11. So he's no stranger to crisis and what you have to do to keep things on the rails, to mix travel metaphors. But I think now it's time to start thinking about the future and get out of sort of crisis mode.
Carlton.
Yeah, on Calhoun saying that rebranding the 737 would be silly, what's been the broader take on the street? Because even consumers, you know, they started paying attention to their airline tickets during that whole time. Yeah,
it's true. And I do think the MAX has a stain. And actually, Dave Calhoun has said as much. Now, one of the reasons he said he wasn't going to change the name is he wasn't going to market his way out of that problem. That's probably the right answer. But ultimately, the plane is bought and put in service by airlines. So they're the ones that he has to win the confidence and trust of. The MAX has, as Boeing points out, has flown about 250,000 flight hours since being reintroduced. Definitely needs to keep a pristine safety record, but as long as things look good, there shouldn't be a branding or a consumer backlash from the MAX. Now, the other thing to note is, you know, consumers don't really have a choice because the MAX is much cheaper to operate than older planes. So airlines that take deliveries of the MAX, they're putting down the old ones and flying the MAX because it saves them so much money.
Al, you're not worried that customers booking their travel on their phones are going to look at the flight details and say, 737 MAX, isn't that the one I heard about from years back? That's not a concern?
I think that 3 to 6 to 9 months from now, I think they might do it now. I think 6 or 9 months from now, given a clean bill of safety, clean safety record, I don't think they'll do that anymore. No.
Ben, go ahead.
Al, you mentioned China as one reason Boeing needs to look to the future. What's the issue there?
Well, China wants to do its own planes, 737 type size planes. It'll probably be 2 generations before, American or European travelers are flying on a Chinese plane, if ever. But China is about 25% of the commercial aerospace market. So, before China gets its own planes in the air and starts thinking about that, I think Boeing would be well served to have the strongest, most up-to-date, newest technology product lineup it can. That's one of the reasons I think they should do a new plane, because that competition will come down the road at some point. And I think, if you don't fix quickly, or if you wait to fix and do nothing right now, I think that'll hurt you in China down the road.
Thanks, Al. Nice to see you.